I'm Vanessa. I was married to Ethan for 7 years, and no matter how hard I tried, his family always made sure I knew I didn't belong. At last summer's family barbecue, I brought dessert, wore the dress his mom would approve of, and even tried to share a small win from my design work. But right as I started talking, his sister Brooke looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone laughed, even Ethan. I raised my hot dog like a toast, looked her straight in the face, and said, "Challenge accepted." I moved out that night. Before we dive in, where are you listening from right now? What's your story? Drop it in the comments. I met Ethan our senior year at the University of North Carolina. I was working 2 jobs and finishing my graphic design degree. He was a business major, fully bankrolled by his parents and already networking with future CEOs. He first walked into the campus cafe where I worked, asking about the book I was reading. We talked until closing. He came back the next night and the next. 3 months later, we were inseparable. By the time we graduated, he proposed with a ring his mom helped him pick out sparkly, tasteful, and cold as glass. At first, it felt like I was being pulled into a dream. Ethan had charm, confidence. He made me feel seen. And his family, the Wards, they were nothing like mine. His father, Charles, ran a marketing firm in Charlotte. His mother, Evelyn, wore pearls to the grocery store and chaired 3 charity boards. His sister, Brooke, was already a VP at the family company by her late 20s. His brother, Luke, was the so-called rebel, though somehow still ended up at a top investment firm through a family friend. I grew up in Durham. Single mom, 2 girls, 1 bedroom, my younger sister, Rachel, and I shared a bed until I moved out for college. Our holidays were potlucks with neighbors. Clothes came from yard sales. But we had grit and love that didn't have to be dressed up to be real. The first time I stepped into the Ward family home, it felt like I'd walked into a catalog, white marble countertops, custom lighting, housekeepers who moved like ghosts. I told myself to stay humble, be grateful, smile, even when the backhanded compliments came, and they did. Evelyn would tell me my art was charming, in the same tone you'd use for a child's finger painting. Charles liked to explain things I already knew. SEO, branding, client outreach, as if I hadn't built my own client base before I even met Ethan. Brooke. Well, Brooke played the long game. She'd correct my pronunciation of wine names, ask who designed my dress with a too sweet smile, and drop casual references to Ethan's ex-girlfriends like they were family traditions. "Brooke's just helping you feel included," Ethan would say. "She doesn't mean anything by it. That's just how she shows love." It didn't feel like love. It felt like I was slowly vanishing. At our wedding, Brooke toasted Ethan's past relationships. When we bought our first house, she asked if the neighborhood was right for someone with the Ward name. When I landed a major contract with a local firm, she asked if they hired me because of who I was married to. But I tried. God, I tried. I volunteered at Evelyn's charity events. I referred clients to Charles. I baked personalized birthday cookies. I dressed like them, talked like them. I even let my business shrink when Ethan got promoted and had to travel. No conversation, just expectation. I took the hint. Then last spring, I miscarried. 11 weeks. Ethan was in Chicago for a conference. He offered to fly home, but sounded relieved when I said I'd be okay. Evelyn sent flowers with a card that read, "Maybe it's a blessing in disguise." These things happen when life is unsettled. Brooke said, maybe the stress from keeping up with a little business wasn't helping. Only Rachel showed up. She brought soup, held my hand, and sat on the floor with me while I cried until morning. She never once asked me to smile through it. Still, I kept showing up, kept trying to be what the wards would finally accept. Then came the summer barbecue. If you've never been to a ward family BBQ, imagine a corporate gala disguised as a backyard cookout caterers, imported grills, monogrammed napkins. They hosted it every year at their lake house. It was the place where alliances were formed, where Evelyn reminded people who mattered and who didn't. I spent the morning baking my grandmother's strawberry shortcake. It was the one thing they'd ever genuinely complimented. Ethan barely noticed. He was on calls about his Tokyo trip. As we drove over, he reminded me, Dad's unveiling his new smoker. Try to act impressed. We got there late. Brooke greeted Ethan with air kisses, looked at me and said, "That dress is cheerful." Then she looped her arm through his and disappeared, talking about someone from his college days. I stood there alone, with my dessert tray like someone's forgotten assistant. When I found Evelyn in the kitchen, she smiled and said, "Oh, you didn't have to bring anything. We have the bakery covering dessert." She pointed to a shelf and said I could set it there for now. That's where they stored paper towels and condiments. Later, I saw a server making space at the dessert table for Brooke's tiramisu center stage. Of course, I made small talk. I smiled. I kept count of how many times I got talked over. Brooke's husband got introduced as Dr. Miller, our Charlotte-based neurosurgeon. Me, I was Ethan's wife. She does creative things, right? When we sat for lunch, I ended up wedged between Ethan's half-deaf uncle and an empty chair waiting for Brooke. Ethan was across the table, deep in a conversation with his father about business etiquette in Japan. At some point, I tried to contribute. I mentioned a bakery client I'd helped with a full brand refresh. Brooke glanced up, bored. "Oh, the one with that tacky neon sign," she said. "It's actually vintage inspired, meant to honor the building's history." Brooke sighed, loud and theatrical. "If you disappeared tomorrow," she said, "no one would even notice." That's how boring this conversation is. The table exploded in laughter. Ethan laughed. Charles grinned. Even Evelyn chuckled behind her napkin. My face flushed. My hands went cold. But I didn't cry. I didn't storm off. I just raised my hot dog like a glass and said, calmly, "Challenge accepted." I moved out that night. I didn't slam a door. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't even tell Ethan anything that night. After that barbecue, after Brooke's disappear and no one would notice joke, and the laughter that followed, I sat through the rest of the afternoon like a ghost. I watched them clink glasses and trade stories. Ethan grinning beside his father. Evelyn complimenting Brooke's tiramisu like it was a masterpiece. No one even noticed I hadn't spoken another word. We left just before sunset. Ethan drove, scrolling through emails at red lights, rambling about a client dinner in Tokyo. I stared out the window, replaying not just that afternoon, but 7 years' worth of smaller moments, every dismissal, every time I got talked over, every half-smile from Evelyn like I was trying too hard. I didn't fight that night. I waited until he was asleep. At 2:07 a.m., I got out of bed and opened my laptop in the hallway so the keys wouldn't click too loud. Bank statements, apartment listings in Seattle, U-Haul reservations. I didn't even know I was crying until I felt the collar of my t-shirt damp against my chest. But it wasn't sadness anymore. It was something sharper, focused. By dawn, I had a plan. Ethan kissed me on the cheek around 8 a.m. I tossed a love you over his shoulder and left for golf with his dad. I called Jessica the second his car pulled away. Jessica and I were roommates in college. She's one of the few people from that time who stuck around, even when I started folding myself into the Ward family mold. She answered on the second ring. "What's up?" "I need to leave," I said. There was a pause. "Do I need to bring snacks or just boxes?" She showed up with both and coffee. We didn't waste time. Clothes, passport, laptop, design equipment, family photos. I didn't take much, just what I needed to start again. Jessica wrapped my grandmother's framed recipe card in a scarf and slid it into a padded tote. "I'll store whatever doesn't fit," she said. "You just go." While she packed, I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my personal account. I didn't take a penny more. I paid my portion of the utilities, canceled the subscriptions in my name, wrote a note. "Ethan, I've taken only what belongs to me. I've covered my share of the bills. I'm leaving to figure out who I am without all this noise. I need space. Please don't contact me right now." Vanessa. I placed my wedding ring on top of the note. Next to it, I printed out Brooke's quote, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice," and clipped it to the top, dated and labeled like an exhibit in court. Then I left. I drove straight to Seattle, 8 hours of white noise on the highway, and the occasional sound of my own breath trying to steady itself. Rachel, my sister, had already set me up with a month-to-month sublet in her neighborhood, a tiny studio with peeling window trim and a creaky floorboard in front of the stove. To me, it felt like freedom. She met me out front with keys, a grocery bag, and a hug that lasted long enough to crack something in my chest. "You good?" she asked. "Getting there," I said. The next few weeks moved fast. New bank, new phone, new zip code. I updated my freelancer profiles and started hunting for clients, the kind that didn't care who I used to be married to. It was hard. My confidence had eroded so gradually, I hadn't noticed it was gone. Then I met Eleanor Marshall. She ran a little coffee shop on the corner near Pike Place. The first time I walked in, I noticed the hand-painted mural on the wall, bold, personal, the kind of work that made you stop and look. The barista saw me admiring it and said, "That's Eleanor's taste. She's the owner. She's looking for someone to redo our menu boards." An hour later, I was sitting across from Eleanor herself. Silver hair, no-nonsense energy, straight shooter. I opened my portfolio. She waved it away. "Show me something you've done that didn't pay your bills. The stuff you made because you had to make it." I hesitated. Then I pulled up a folder I hadn't opened in years. Experimental pieces, sketches that had no client, no objective, just color and instinct. She stared at them for a long time. Then she looked up and said, "You've been hiding." That sentence hit me like a slap. Then she added, "You're hired. One condition. You make one thing a week just for you. I want to see it, finished or not." Eleanor didn't just become a client. She became a lifeline. She introduced me to other small business owners, sent referrals my way, pushed me to be bolder in my designs. With her, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. She didn't care about the wards. She cared about the work. And slowly, I came back. It wasn't glamorous. I was designing flyers for sandwich shops, doing packaging for artisan candles, formatting PDFs for yoga instructors. But it paid the rent. More importantly, it reminded me I had something to offer. Meanwhile, I stayed off social media. Rachel kept me updated with just enough to keep me grounded. The wards hadn't made a single public mention of me. No family-wide search, no grand gestures. It was like I had evaporated and they were fine with the empty space I left behind. 6 months in, I picked up a new contract, a regional campaign for a local food startup. I poured myself into it, and it paid off. The project got featured in a couple of small business design blogs. That's when the email arrived. Subject designer inquiry, national campaign opportunity. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But then I saw the sender, Westwood Creative. They were a legit national branding agency. The email mentioned they'd seen my work on the Rainier Foods campaign and wanted to bring me in for a consultation. The client, Sheffield Consumer Brands. I clicked through. Sheffield was a subsidiary of Ward & Co., Charles Ward's firm. I sat frozen for a few seconds. Then I stood up, made tea, and called Eleanor. After I laid it all out, she said, "It could be a coincidence, or maybe they know." Question is, does it matter if the work is real and the contract is clean? Why not show up and own it? She was right. Whether it was coincidence or karma, that campaign was real, and I wasn't going to run from my own success. I emailed Westwood back. "Happy to meet. Let me know when." When I walked into the gala, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not nerves, not dread, control. The venue was a restored opera house in downtown Seattle. Velvet carpets, crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where every whispered conversation felt important. Westwood Creative had a table near the front. I was the lead designer for the Sheffield rebrand, and tonight they were unveiling the new packaging line as one of the marquee presentations. The moment I checked in, I knew the Wards were already there. I hadn't seen them in almost a year, not since the day I left Ethan, but I didn't flinch. I straightened the name badge on my lapel and walked toward the ballroom with steady steps. I saw Ethan first. He was standing near the bar, thinner than I remembered, in a charcoal suit that probably cost as much as my rent. His eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on me. The shock was immediate. His jaw slackened just a second before he caught himself. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I turned and greeted the Westwood director like nothing had happened. Inside, I was seated between two industry reps and the firm's creative director. We made small talk about sustainability trends in packaging. I contributed easily, confidently. No one talked over me. No one corrected my vocabulary. They listened. 30 minutes in, I spotted Brooke near the stage. Her dress was perfect, her expression carefully composed. She noticed me too. Her eyes paused just a second longer than polite society allowed, then flicked away like I was irrelevant. But the moment came when she couldn't avoid me. As Westwood's team headed backstage to prep, she intercepted us in the hallway, placing herself right in our path. "Vanessa," she said, voice light, but calculated. What a surprise. I met her eyes. "Brooke." She turned to our creative director. "And you are Thomas Bain. I lead Westwood's design team. Vanessa's been extraordinary on this project." Her smile tightened. "We're family, actually, or used to be." Thomas gave a neutral nod and motioned for us to continue. I followed him without looking back. We stepped on stage 15 minutes later. The ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the screen. And, for the first time in over a year, I stood on a stage not as someone's wife, not as a tag-along in-law, but as a professional presenting work I had led start to finish. I walked the audience through our design philosophy, showed before and after shots of the branding transformation, spoke about sustainability choices, consumer psychology, and shelf presence. There were nods, even applause, from the stage. I could see the Wards seated near the front, Charles's expression unreadable, Evelyn's face frozen in her signature smile. Brooke whispering to someone beside her. But Ethan, he didn't move. He didn't take his eyes off me once. After the presentation, a line of people formed near the stage. Questions, compliments, business cards. By the time I stepped off the platform, my voice was hoarse. Ethan caught me near the stairwell. "You look," he started. "You look good." I waited. "I didn't know you were working on this campaign. That was intentional," I said. He nodded, awkward hands shoved into his pockets. "Your presentation was incredible." I gave him a polite smile. "Thanks." We stood there, facing each other under the ornate sconces, like two people who used to know each other in another lifetime. "I miss you," he said. And for the first time, I didn't feel pulled by those words. I didn't feel responsible for his regret. I just felt free. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence settle. Eventually, I said, "I hope you're doing the work. Not just missing what we had, but understanding why it ended." "I'm trying," he said. And for once, I believed him. We parted with a handshake, clean, respectful. A few minutes later, Evelyn approached me in the lounge near the restrooms. "Vanessa." "Darling," she said, air kissing the air near my cheek. "You've been missed at our family gatherings." I tilted my head. Interesting. I remember being told my strawberry shortcake belonged in the pantry. Her smile flickered, but she recovered fast. "Misunderstandings happen, not for 7 years straight," I said, calm, factual. She didn't argue, just gave a polite nod and drifted away. The final moment came when Brooke stopped me at the coat check. "I didn't think you'd actually build something after leaving," she said. "That's the difference between disappearing and being dismissed," I replied. "You assumed I couldn't exist without you. I just chose not to." Her jaw clenched. Then, quietly, she said, "Your work is good. I would have said that no matter who you were." I believed her, but I didn't need it. Not anymore. Later that night, back at my hotel, I stood in front of the mirror. Same face, new energy. I wasn't the woman who'd held a hot dog like a white flag and whispered, "Challenge accepted." I was the one who'd followed through. A month after the gala, I closed on a house. It wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, no lake view, no chef's kitchen, no monogrammed linens. But it had a bright corner studio for my design work and a tiny backyard where I could plant tomatoes come spring. Most importantly, it was mine, paid for with my own money, signed with my own name. I spent the first night on the floor with a mattress, a lamp, and a mug of tea. No furniture yet, just soft music and the sound of the city through a cracked window. That quiet, it felt like peace. I'd stayed in therapy since Seattle. Dr. Harlan and I had moved from trauma to patterns, then from patterns to intentions. "You're not just healing," she said one session. "You're rebuilding with a better blueprint." And she was right. I no longer jumped to justify myself when challenged. I no longer made myself small in rooms that felt too sharp. I spoke when I had something to say, and I let silence hold when I didn't. Work was steady. I had a reliable rotation of freelance clients, some corporate, some small businesses, all respectful. A few even started referring to me as their designer, which made me smile more than it should have. It felt good to belong somewhere by choice, not by effort. Jessica visited often. Rachel even started bringing her own friends around, joking that Vanessa's porch wine nights were the hottest ticket in town. And then one Saturday morning, at the farmer's market near my street, I saw her, Brooke, except this time, she wasn't in heels or a statement blazer. She was wearing jeans, a sweatshirt, and most surprising of all, an unmistakable pregnancy bump. She stood at the stall next to mine, studying a wedge of goat cheese like it held national security implications. Our eyes met. She hesitated, then stepped toward me. Vanessa, Brooke, she placed the cheese in her tote. Didn't expect to see you here. I live nearby. Since when? 6 months ago. She nodded slowly, like turning over a puzzle piece. There was an awkward beat. Then she said, I've been thinking about what you said. At the gala, I waited, about being dismissed and about showing up for yourself. She shifted her weight. I'm starting to realize I don't want my kid growing up thinking they have to perform for love. That caught me off guard, not because she said it, but because she meant it. I started therapy, she added. Charlotte gave me the name. I studied her face, still poised, still cautious, but something softer had crept in, something uncertain and honest. Good, I said. That's a good place to start. We didn't hug, we didn't swap numbers. We just nodded and parted like two people who finally understood they were never meant to compete, only to choose different paths. And mine was finally clear. I had stopped asking whether the wards thought about me, stopped wondering if Ethan still missed me, stopped waiting for someone to acknowledge the pain I'd carried for years, because that acknowledgement had to start with me. I didn't just disappear. I reappeared in a life where I was no longer background noise. A few weeks later, I got an invitation to speak at a creative workshop for young women starting their own businesses. I talked about branding, sure, but more than that, I talked about self-definition, about how you don't have to be loud to take up space. You just have to stop shrinking. Afterward, a girl came up to me and said, I never thought I could do this until I heard your story. I handed her my card. You can, and you will. That night, I stood on my back porch, barefoot, sipping wine from a chipped mug, staring at the stars above Seattle. There was no audience, no applause, no final confrontation waiting to be had, just stillness and clarity. I wasn't trying to be seen by anyone else anymore. I was fully visible to myself. Brooke once said, if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. She was wrong, because in disappearing from their world, I reappeared in my own. And this version of me, she doesn't ask to be invited in. She builds the door, opens it, and walks through. Have you ever left a room you were never welcome in and found something better on the other side? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs that final nudge. Thanks for listening. And remember, being visible doesn't always mean being loud. Sometimes it just means refusing to be erased.